Chapter 3. Everything began to come back slowly, muffled at first, and then blaring to life once I realised exactly where I was. A high-pitched car horn sounded from several floors down on the street, followed by people shouting, an overwhelming amount of traffic noise. Normally, I wouldn't notice it, but this morning I could hear it all too clearly. I was in my apartment from the feel of the soft, cool satin sheets. I cringed as I rolled onto my back, expecting to roll over into a nice puddle of blood that soaked into the sheets and mattress halfway before congealing the rest. Then I remembered the fact that I hadn't killed anybody, with the final realisation that I was clean, and so were my sheets. My eyes popped open wide, and I bolted upright, using my hands to inspect the comforter covering my legs. I was also wearing a nightgown, which I hardly ever did. I didn't recognise it. Did she buy me something new to make up for the mess? From the looks of it, it was brand new. I didn't remember having one like this in my closet. The gown was crimson red and flowed down to my ankles, all elegance and silk, like something I would have bought for myself. She was making up for something, but also reminding me of the prior event based on the colour of the gown. Her menacing symbolism wasn't lost on me, or the fact that it was long, covering me from shoulders to ankles, just like Carl's warm blood my pale flesh had. Images of his body in the shower and spurting blood and torn skin flashed through my mind. Red was definitely my colour, but I didn't want the thing on my body any longer. Not after everything I saw the night before. I reached down, gripping the bottom of the gown below the comforter, pulling it up and over my head, and I threw it on the floor. What a sick and twisted sense of humour you have, I sighed as I stared at the thing up against the white marble tiles. The sun wasn't up yet, which made me wonder what time it was. Turning to take a glance at the alarm clock on the bedside table, the green letters read 6 in the morning. My alarm would go off in the next half an hour, so I could get ready to meet this artist, who somehow is responsible for the painting of a lethal woman that just happened to resemble me, in more ways than one. The mahogany hair, one green eye and one brown, the half-eaten heart clenched in her fist. The future of me and Hyde seemed to be painted on that canvas, and I couldn't suppress the shiver that racked my spine, sending goosebumps cascading over my skin in waves. She moved within me, reminding me she was there, and that I needed to thank her for assistance. I sighed in frustration. I wouldn't have needed it if you wouldn't have killed him, I retorted, when a tremor thought moved through me. It was like a feminine growl resonated within my muscles and bones, pooling in the centre of my chest right over my heart. My stomach decided it was time to speak up as well, but my phone rang, and it took precedence. The Dexter ringtone echoed through my bedroom, and Lauren's name popped up on the touchscreen of the LG phone that I was hell-bent on replacing one of these days. Sliding my thumb across the screen to answer it, I started speaking before putting it to my ear to hear her smoky and hungover voice. Hi Lauren. Yes, I made it home just fine. You don't have to worry. I could hear her moving around on the other end of the line. Do you have to speak so loudly? If you didn't want me to be loud, you shouldn't have called while you were still hungover. You know, Mum, you don't have to check up on me every time we go out. I let the sarcasm worm its way into my words as I spoke, pulling the comforter up to cover my bare chest. I'm choosing to ignore that. She cleared her throat. What did you do after I left? I had a drink. Did I want to lie? The quick answer was yes. And then I went home. She knew how I felt about going home alone. She wouldn't buy it. Really? That doesn't sound like you. Did she know me or what? I was beginning to think I needed to hang out with a more diverse group to avoid things like this. Is that your nice way of calling me a slut? I may have been true, but it was one thing for your friends to know it. It was a whole other thing for them to call you out on it when they were just as bad as you were. Absolutely not, she responded, her voice filled with mock surprise. She was working her way hard to sound offended. The line went silent for a moment, and then a soft breathing came on the line. That was when I knew she had fallen asleep while on the phone, which was typical, even after just one drink. I could hear her rhythmic breathing, so I ended the call and placed the phone back on the table next to the alarm clock, looking around the room to make sure everything else was in order. Everything was as it should be, and I was thrilled to see that Hyde even laid clothes out for me to wear. The black dress hung on the closet door, just waiting to be slipped over my skin. My favourite black heels were pushed up against the bottom of the door, the red soles calling out to me with power I never knew the hue could have. With a sigh, I pushed the covers off my legs and swung them over the edge, letting the cool marble chill my feet and sending a shiver up my spine. One reason I loved marble so much was that it was always cool. I got up and made my way to the bathroom, taking a quick shower as I could, but making sure I was still clean enough to appear in front of people. After this meeting, I'd be stuck at the gallery and then possibly out with Lauren or alone again. Maybe it really was time to catch up on the Walking Dead. Contrary to what Hyde would want anyone to believe, I wasn't just a killing machine. I was a woman who wanted all of the normal things in life, like a night in watching some television with some ice cream, or maybe even some chocolate and a glass of Merlot. Once I was showered, lotioned, and hair was dry and styled in a loose bun with a few tendrils hanging loose around my face in soft curls, I was ready to slip the dress over my head, slip on my shoes, and make my debut with the artist. The feeling of how uncanny it is for this artist seems to already know me is unshakable. It simply kept playing over and over in my mind. I was still tired and bags had formed under my eyes, but I covered them quickly with some concealer. It had become more of a pale green than lavender purple, so I decided that it was good enough. Eyeliner with a sheen of lip gloss finished the look, and I was ready to be out and about in the Big Apple yet again. I was still shaken by what had happened to me and what Hyde did while I was a ghost to the world. But I couldn't dwell on it. I needed to move on, and this was how I would do it. I took a deep breath in and stared at myself in the mirror. All I smelled was roses, my absolute favourite scent when it came to lotions or sprays of any kind. It worked well with my body chemistry when nothing else seemed to, except that of blood and gore. which I had to say wasn't very appealing to me. To Hyde, yes, but not to me. It seemed the only thing that could cover up the scent of death around me were roses. How fitting was that? It was a great thing no one knew about my affliction, because I didn't want the stigma attached to what I was damned. I didn't want to be damned. That was what Hyde had called it. But how much more was there to it? My reflection smiled as I watched, nodding at me as I stared. I wasn't sure what to do but walk away from it and finally make my way down to the street in speeding taxis. The hushed hallway was disturbing as I made my way to the elevator, spying a man in a black pinstripe suit walking for the elevator, noticing me as I moved to stand beside him. Obviously, he got off on the wrong floor, as this one was all mine. I didn't say anything. He made no effort to hide his stares, but I didn't even care. Men had a tendency to do that when I was around, and it was something I was used to. Not that sometimes I did want their eyes to look away and never notice me ever again. Yes, I was the rich and successful woman who was complaining about always being the centre of a man's attention just because of her looks. I wasn't as superficial as some believed, and they were always shocked to learn it. Granted, I never went to bed with an unattractive man, but who said I wouldn't at some point? Well, at least someone who wasn't attractive to others. If anything, my looks had a tendency to get me into trouble, which was obvious in the situation with Kyle was any indicator at all. I felt the man's eyes roam over me as the numbers ticked by while we waited. He took a deep breath, like he was about to speak. It was time to stop it before it started. Turning to him, I let my eyes meet his and saw his expression change from one of amusement to lust, to one of confusion and bewilderment. He had seen what I meant him to see. I wouldn't if I were you. The words slithered from my lips to caress his cheek like a viper waiting to strike as soon as he tried to speak again. With wide eyes, he looked away and didn't even care to follow into the elevator he had been waiting for. I couldn't help but wave at him as he closed the doors. Even I had to admit that there was something in my eyes that scared me a little once I saw my own reflection in shining metal. My mouth dropped open when the shining green in my eyes, right beneath the brown, shone in the light of the space. There was no mistaking it. There was definitely a monster inside. I hadn't let her out with Carl, and she was fighting against my less than fine-tuned control. I felt her rolling around in his blood inside me, leftovers from the heart she'd ripped from him and chewed on like a dog with a bone. It was raw and bloody, tasting of iron and sinew. I swallowed down the thought along with a sour touch of bile and closed my eyes, trying my best to force them back to normalcy that I knew I could never have. I wanted to control her, and I wanted the dark nights snuggled with someone who was just like Dax. But Hyde didn't see fit for any of that. All she wanted was warm, fresh crimson flowing down her throat and down her chin. Maybe she would get it. Maybe not. I guessed it was all up to me. Her. No. Us. Yes. Us.